Okay. Hi, everyone. So thank you for joining us today. So we're gonna have three speakers, and Scott will introduce them. So I'm Jen Ashley. I'm one of the organizers of Svelte London, and it's like we're just trying to sort out some things here. We did test this.
Technical issues. Oh no.
Okay. All right. So yes. So welcome to everyone who's joining us here, and welcome to everyone joining us remotely. Anthony.
Hi, I'm Anthony, Svelte maintainer. Yeah, someone when I can. Scott.
Hi everyone, I'm Scott. I'm just helping organise this with Anthony and Jen. Really good turnout tonight, so thank you everyone for showing up. We've got three speakers. We've got two who are here right now, and we've got one person who is doing a remote talk for us. And that's it for the stream. So thank you for bearing with us while we try to get all of this working. Just for everyone here, there's food, there's burgers. There's 2-for-1 burgers tonight. So if you would like to get a burger with anyone, go and order it at the bar, and they will get you sorted right out. And there's also the Svelte.js code of conduct we need to mention as well. So we hope that everyone would, understand and adhere to that while you're here. You've got anything to add, Anthony?
Yeah, just so basically, this code of conduct. Every meetup should have one. It's more of an American thing, but it's just be good to each other. If you're having a problem with someone else, please come to us. You can talk to any of us for this meetup. Basically, the reason we do that is because your problem might be with one of us, probably me, to be fair. But essentially, feel free to speak up, let us know, and we can solve any problem you have. That's about it. It's on. Do you want to go? Yeah, this is a link to it. Yeah, that's more important. But this is a community link here. This has got the code of conduct in here. Have a quick read. All good. 2-for-1 burgers already mentioned. That's just 2-for-2. It's definitely not 2-for-2. It's 2-for-1. You get one free. All good. And so our first speaker is Bikani Kamalo. I'm sorry if I botched your name. Thank you.
Good. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Begani, and my talk today is how I built ProSearch with Smartkit. It's a little awkward. Can I turn a little bit? Yeah. Okay, so a more accurate title for what I'm talking about is what I learned from building ProSearch with Svelte. Maybe something even less than that, because it's not so much about how I built a thing, but more like how I fell in love with Svelte as I was doing this. So yeah, you'll see as we go. So my name is Begani Kumalo, Begani K on all of the social medias. I'm a software engineer at Anaplan. Before software engineering, I was a civil and water engineer for about 4 years. After that, I was a GIS consultant, then eventually a GIS developer, and that's how I kind of slid into software engineering. So yeah, Begani K everywhere on social media. And today's my birthday. Yeah. 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 All right, so ProSearch, for those who don't know, I'm assuming lots of people don't know because it's not like I marketed it, but ProSearch is an advanced search query builder for search engines, right? And that's how it looks. But before we take a look at ProSearch a little more, I want to talk a bit about why does this exist? Why did I build this? And all of that. Okay, so in August 2021, around about that time, I started seeing a lot of tweets of people sharing, tips about how to refine your Google searches, parameters that you can add to your tweet to kind of filter your results and make them more specific and things like that. So, for some reason, it just became popular around that time. And I kind of took note of it and thought, had some thoughts out of it. But when I was looking at it, I figured this stuff is cool, right? Because you can use it to refine your searches, but it has some problems. And so the two problems that I think were the biggest, list how I identified it, was the first one is that many people don't even know that these parameters exist, that you can add, I don't know, plus, ampersand, whatever, to make your query more specific and stuff like that. Most people don't care to know because it adds friction on top, right? And for those who do know, they end up using a very small subset of them because there's no easy way, first of all, of using them. So you just got to remember it and add it to your thing. And so over time you learn some stuff, but you forget it. Maybe you'll remember a few that you found the most useful, and that's it. And so most people end up not using it. And I think these two problems are a result of a single problem. And that there's no single place where you can kind of find out what is available, and there's no intuitive like UI to edit to your search. You just got to remember that I can add some stuff to my search query, and it's worse because some of them are query parameters, so no one wants to go up and fiddle with the URL in order to get stuff to work, right? Most of us, when we use search, we want to get there, do some stuff quickly and just go, right? We don't want to spend time fiddling with Google to get stuff to happen. All right. There's actually an existing solution made by Google. It's Google Advanced Search, right? It looks something like that. So I looked at it. It does provide you all of these things, but there's a couple problems with it. The first one is that it doesn't look like it gets a lot of love, at least not not like the normal search, right? So it's like this, and this is a one page here, the main one, right? And when you land on, if you look at the bottom, there are additional pages that you can land on. So it's kind of separated. Image search is on its own, news is on its own, and other stuff. So you can't compose into a single query, say maybe I want you to give me news sources that provide these kinds of images and this kind of stuff. So because it's different, it's different stuff, you can't put it together. So there's a bunch of problems with it, at least in my opinion. It's not a great user experience. So now that we've got that background, that's why I built ProSearch, and this is ProSearch. So before we get into this Svelte specific stuff, I just want to show you a little bit about how it works, and then hopefully at least we can kind of have that picture. And as we talk about why I thought Svelte was a good way of building. I'm going to carry my laptop because I'll have to interact with it quite a bit. Okay, so let's say you want to search, I'll say Africa fintech, right? You want to search for fintechs in Africa. This is ProSearch. You just land here, you type. If it's just normal search, you just type your query and it'll take you straight to Google, right? And it's not just Google, it's multiple search engines. But maybe you want to go a little further and customize some things, right? Let's say instead of just fintechs, I want to know about fintech that raised some money. So, I'll add raise, right? Now it's a little refined because it's looking at fintechs, but it has to have the specific word raise in whatever results that I get, right? But maybe that's still not enough because I'm not just interested in everything that happened. I want to get maybe just results from the last 7 days, right? So I'll say, give you that, and then just go. And now, if you look at the page, everything 3 days, 6 days, so forth. It's just stuff from the last 7 days, right? And maybe I want to refine a little further and say, okay, maybe I don't just want any type of content. I want just news, right? And so I select that, and now I've only got news sites only, right? But there's a problem because it's giving me all of this stuff, but maybe I want to be specific. It can see that I'm in the UK. It's giving me the UK site, right? But maybe I'm interested in Nigeria, and then I want to say, okay, just give me the stuff from Nigeria. I can select Nigeria as a locale, right, for Google to use, if I can find it. Nigeria. Okay, there we go. And so now it's been narrowed down, and it's only giving me, fintechs that raised in Nigeria. And if I go to the bottom, you see now we're using the Nigeria locale for Google. But you can still see that my location is in London, right? So maybe I don't want that. And so I can come in here and say, okay, just turn off personalization. This turns off for the most part. It doesn't turn off entirely because Google is still tracking a couple of things about you. But now at least it's not taking my location into account, right? And so in just a short time, I've composed this really complex query. If you look at the URL that's generated, it's really long. Some of the things are query params and stuff like that, right? And so this is the idea. There's if I log in, I had a bit of trouble logging in because of the Wi-Fi here. But if I log in, I can save this query, because you can imagine composing a big query like this is a problem. I don't want to be doing it all the time, so I can save it so that next week when I come back to search for the last 7 days and whatever, I can just add in the same stuff. So that's ProSearch in a nutshell. And the idea was that just make it easy to add this stuff, right? And somebody doesn't need to remember what it is. You can just find the filter that applies to what you're doing. Okay. So when I was building this, I had a couple of priorities, right, for what I was looking for. And the first one was that it should be able to load fast, right? Just as fast as going to Google straight or going to Bing and whatever. Like I said, it supports multiple search engines, right? And the second one was that it needs to have a simple and intuitive UI and no fancy bells and whistles, nothing else. You just go there and search, and it's just search, right? And the third one, if you're not using complex search, it should be just as simple as going to Google or going to Bing or whatever. You just land there. The search box is already, the search input is already in focus, and you just type and go. And the fourth one is it should be, and this was for the sake of development, right? It should be very, very easy to handle state. And the reason I wanted to handle state really well is because ProSearch essentially is just a whole big application that's just, I have a global state that's monitoring all of the filters that I'm using, my search terms that I've put in and whatever. And so all of the toggles and the inputs and all of that are changing just one single state object. And I should be able to access it from different parts of the app, because when I'm sharing, when I'm searching, when I'm doing all of the different things, it's all accessing that same thing. And just as a bonus thing, this wasn't strictly a requirement, but I wanted to be able to create a PWA quickly and to be able to optimize it nicely for desktop. Some context, I was coming from React. Before, around that time in August of 2021, I had never used Svelte before. I didn't even really know how it looks like exactly, but I'd heard some stuff about it. So, I thought it was interesting. So despite that, I chose to use SvelteKit, despite the fact that, I was essentially a React person, which was an odd choice. And the inspiration was that, generally I like to work on projects that will expose me to tech that I'm not used to, right? Because at work, I don't really entirely choose the tech that I work on. And like doing this exposes me to parts of the stack or the software development lifecycle that I typically don't get a chance to do at work, right? Because if I'm working on if I'm a front-end developer, I typically won't do any DevOpsy stuff or whatever, everything else. And it it keeps me interested in just tech and software engineering in general. What's going on? So why I chose Svelte, right? I heard that it was fast. I'd never seen it for myself, so I thought, oh, so this is they say it's fast, so I'll give it a shot because I'm looking to build something that's fast. And then secondly, so after I made the decision, I thought, okay, let me use Svelte. I spent a couple of hours, went through the docs, amazing docs, best docs I had seen. So the tutorial thing with the REPL by the side. I'm trying out things as I go. By the end of the day, on that same day when I started, I had a basic bare bones pro search. Essentially, the main stuff about the app was done in a day. Of course, there was so much to do, and so that on its own kind of sold Svelte to me because I built this thing. I learned the whole thing, well, not the whole thing, but enough for me to build a thing in a day. And yeah, so I thought that was great. And I think being able to do that was mostly because the docs were really great. I was probably leaning on other knowledge from stuff that I already knew, but that was it. And another thing, so a little later, I think like 2 months ago or something like that, I opted some friends to help me out because I wanted them to build some issues. They had never done in Svelte before. One of them was really, really new to software development in general and had done a little bit of HTML, CSS, and JS. But he was able to get going really fast because if you know HTML, just HTML, you can build a Svelte component because if you throw in a button, it's a Svelte component, right? So it's really great. I think Svelte is great for somebody who's coming in because you can have this incremental introduction into the whole thing. If you're just an HTML person, you can contribute. If you know a little bit of CSS, you can contribute, and then you kind of grow into it incrementally. And then the state management, like I've already mentioned, was pretty much the main thing about the decision to go with Svelte for this. Because, with the Svelte store, I just create one store. I can access it from anywhere in the app. It's reactive, and it was just great for a lot of different reasons. And so that alone was enough to, even if everything else was not there and it was just the stores, I still would have chosen Svelte for this because it made things really easy. You can imagine if you are manipulating the same state from all sorts of different places, it can get complex really quickly. And I think another thing with the Svelte stores is that when I was, it took me quite a bit of time to learn and understand context. It took me quite a bit of time, when I was learning Redux, even more, and all of the different state stuff that I was dealing with when I was in React. But with Svelte stores, it didn't even take me an hour to understand what's going on. Now, granted, I was probably leaning on knowledge I'd already gained from elsewhere, but it's really simple. I mean, it's really, really simple. So that was really great. And then the components in Svelte are really lean. I'm sure if you've seen tutorials, heard anybody talk about Svelte and comparing it with anything else, you've probably seen somebody take a React component and start deleting stuff out of it to show that the Svelte component is smaller. So that was great. And then I've never really worked with animations or transitions in React. And so I knew very little about that, but I was able to quickly add that to Svelte because it comes in the box, right? And I don't have to think about a lot of things. I just plug it in and it just works. Okay, so I just want to show a little bit of the code. It's not very in-depth stuff, but just to show you. Oh, cool. So the store looks something like this. So this is the type for the store. I've got multiple queries. So each query will have a search term, which is the term that you put in the main search bar. And then you have the filters. So the filters is just it's a map of multiple filters. As you apply them, I'm just adding, putting additional things on top into that map. And then this is the search provider that you're going to use, Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, whatever, right? And then the name, if you are saving it, you can give it a name so that you can quickly identify it. This other stuff that I'm, metadata stuff. And so this is a store that is used across the app that powers the entire stuff. So for the filters themselves, I just built this base. It's a base filter which just has optionally allows you to add a drop down, a select input, or a text input, or a toggle, right? And then using that, you can provide some props at the top to kind of tell it what kind of filter is it. You tell it how to handle changes and stuff like that. So this is the base. And all of the filters that I used extend this space and kind of just tell it this additional information, like you are the filter for giving exact dates, or you are the filter for handling location or locale or stuff like that. And so an exact filter would be like this. So this is the one that says, give me an exact term. And you can see all I'm doing is I'm telling it the type for you is exact. It has an input because you need to input some stuff. And then that's a label. And this is the handler for when things change in the input. And so when things change, you can see in the filters, I'm just adding an additional property. And then I'm formatting it though with whatever, those tips that I was getting from Google and all sorts of articles on the internet. And so for this one, it's adding query parameters. The query parameters only work on Google. They don't work on the other search engines. So it's a little different. It's the same filter for the exact term, but for other search engines, you see it's a little different. I'm just adding quotations and then I'll append it to the search term. And so all I'm doing is I have this base component over here that I built, and very easily I could just extend on top of it and just provide a handle to. Oh yeah. Cool. And then so the theme with all of this is I want to see. So that was the base query that I showed you, and so this change handler is updating the same query store that we saw at the start. And then when you're formatting, when you actually click search, I'll take all of those filters, compose them together into one search term. So again, I'm accessing that same store and doing some stuff to it. Some of them as query parameters, some of them are not query parameters, and so I'm handling them differently and whatever. But I'm still working on that same store. And if and this one, when you are saving the queries, again, I'm accessing stuff from that same store and taking it, putting it in a format that I can throw into a database. And then when you are sharing, again, I take from that same store and I compose it in a way that makes it easy to share. Build up the URL so that you can click the share button and just push it to whoever you're sharing with. And so the thing I wanted to show here is that is that same store, and it was very easy to just plug it into these different circumstances. You see, some of them are Svelte components, some of them are just utility functions, some of them are, all sorts of different things. But for each of them, they access the same store. When things change, it's reactive. It updates the entire app, and I didn't need to set up anything. I didn't need to think about it too much. The only thing that you do to set up the store is just call this writable, and that's it. Yeah, going. So some lessons out of this. Svelte is really nice to work in. I had a great time, and comparing to, I had a great time. I have a great time with React in general. I really like React, but I like Svelte more because things are generally much simpler or much smaller and stuff like that. So there's always that comparison. Secondly, the Svelte community is really great, really supportive and responsive. A recent example is, so when I was building ProSearch, I had trouble with testing, right? Initially, I was trying to set up testing. I got a bunch of errors, and I didn't want to spend too much time on it, so I just quit, right? And so recently, when I wanted to think about the testing again, I tweeted at Svelte Society, and within 5 minutes, people from all over were responding, telling me this and that. This is how they were doing it. They were sending me tutorials. They were sending me all sorts of different links. Even from people I learned software development from, people like Scott Tolinsky, which is, I was a little starstruck, responded to my tweet. So the community has been really responsive on, everything that I've asked. And also, Svelte, I can't pinpoint exactly why, right? But Svelte has encouraged me to, learn vanilla HTML and JS and all of that more, right? I now find myself, going to MDN and looking up, the form data API or URLs or query params and stuff like that. And thinking about those things. Now, I've worked with React a lot, but I don't find myself thinking too much about the modern web things and trying to find out how these APIs work, because I don't know what the reason is. But when I've been the whole time I've been using Svelte, it kind of encourages me to concern myself about vanilla DOM APIs. And then this is not a Svelte thing, but TypeScript, it's been awesome to work with. And then suddenly now React feels very bloated, because I work with React at work, right? And every time, I complain a lot now. Do we need to do these tons of things? Because on my own projects, I'm working at Svelte, and I think that's a great feeling. It's a great place to be, right? Where Svelte kind of makes you start to feel like a lot of this stuff is a burden that we're carrying for no well, it's not for no reason, but there's a better way, right? And then some struggles I've already mentioned. I had trouble with testing. Now it's not like it's something that I couldn't solve, but I didn't. I had to spend too much time trying to fix it. Now I understand, SvelteKit is not even at version 1, so there's stuff that needs to be is still being figured out and stuff like that, right? So it's fine. I understand, and I was cool with it. And like I said, when I asked, the community was really supportive, and I was able to get the help that I needed. The second thing is the library ecosystem is still pretty young and it's growing. It's understandable. I mean, Svelte is pretty young, and there's been a lot of things. I mean, even from the time when I started in August up until now, there's so much that has come up, and it's great. There's people like Scott Tolinsky, who has a series where he's highlighting all of these different libraries and stuff from Svelte, which are great. And then the best practices are evolving and are still evolving. One challenge that I had was I wasn't sure how to structure the app, right? And a bunch of code bases that I've seen on GitHub all structure things a little different. And so it's one of those things where it's still growing. Now, you can view this as a disadvantage or an advantage, right? It's a disadvantage in that you can't just get up and go and know this is how we do things as well. But at the same time, it's great because you get an opportunity to contribute, because it's still evolving and it's developing, and you can contribute to that. And then I struggled to find a UI library that had a component library that had all of the stuff that I needed, but I found Daisy UI, which was great. And the good thing is that, like I said, it encourages me to use CSS in its vanilla form, and I've been using Tailwind as well. So with Daisy UI and extending it with Tailwind, I was able to build out pretty much everything that I needed for them. And finally, thank you. That's the whole thing. That's how I built ProSearch with SvelteKit. And if you want to check it out, it's at prosearch.io. And if you want to check out the code, there's the link over there. And then the two below are just some other projects that I'm working on. You notice that, so it's shameless plug, I guess. You notice that I was talking about Africa and raising and stuff like that. It's because I've been working on this project, Deal-Based Africa, and the idea is just to highlight, Africa is often told for its negatives, right? There's poverty in Africa, there's dictators and stuff like that. But Deal-Based was a way of telling the other stories about Africa, to say there's innovation going on in Africa, there's people who are building awesome stuff, and they're investors putting money into Africa. And so Deal-Based is that. And then I also write a weekly newsletter, Just Reflections. I think I had Deal-Based open just to show you how it looks. You can check it out on Okay, so it's not. You'll check it out on your own time. Oh, there we go. I thought it wasn't going to open because I was struggling with the internet. But yeah, so Dilbase is just highlighting this is what investments happened in Africa in the last 7 days or whatever query you put in there. This is who raised money, this is how much they raised, this was the investor and stuff like that, just to encourage investors to know that there's stuff happening and to encourage founders to know that you can actually raise money in Africa in tech, and there's big stuff happening. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Bakani. Yeah, Svelte's great, isn't it? So, what you were saying now with regards to, it helps you learn a lot of the browser APIs. You get a lot closer to the actual platform using it, which is what I found. I started around the same time, April last year, using it, and it's a joy. It just seems a lot faster than most other tools out there at the moment. So, less of me talking about that. So, yes. Does anyone have any questions for Bakani? So I think the question was if it's going to be integrated into other, do you mean like a browser extension? Because, yeah, I think Bakani said it was just like a site, but I think he's asking, and it's also a PWA, but I'll let Bakani answer. I think.
Yeah, so it's just a site right now. It's also a PWA, so if you go on your phone, you can download it, or on your Mac or whatever. And that's it. I mean, I have thought about building a Chrome extension and all of that stuff. The code base is public on GitHub if you wanna go check it out and extend it. Yeah. 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 Oh, cool. Relating to the community. So the most recent example, I guess, is I was struggling with this testing thing, and so I tweeted at Svelte Society and said, what are people out there using for testing Svelte kit? Because I've been struggling with this, and so I got people who told me about Cypress. I think Scott said they use Cypress across their entire site. There were people who were pointing to Uvu. I think there's a library called Uvu. And then there were people who were pointing to what's this one? That's Playwright and others. So I can share the tweet, I guess, and you can see what people were saying. It was really useful to me because people passed me some really useful links. Yeah. Yeah, I did look at Svelte material UI. I kind of had a bias because I wanted to find something to use Tailwind on. Yeah, so that's why I skipped it. But yeah, it's really good. There's another one. I think it's by IBM. What's it called? Carbon? Is it something? Yeah. But I had a leaning towards Tailwind. That's why yeah.
Daisy UI is a fantastic plugin. It's a Tailwind plugin, and you've got loads of pre-made components on their site. It's a really good bit of kit. So, we're done for questions for Bakani. Okay, cool. So, I think we're going to have Jay up next. Jay, hello. How you doing?
How's it going, Scott? Can you hear me okay?
Data dashboards using Svelte and Sveltekit. So, take it away, Jay.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Is the volume loud enough when I'm speaking?
Can't hear you.
Can't hear me. Let me.
No. Are you muted, Jay? We can't seem to hear you.
How about now?
Okay, hang on.
One, two, one, two. Okay, I'm just turning the mic volume up. Is that better?
Okay, so Jay, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear us. So we can't hear you. So maybe try turning it off and on again.
Yeah, let's try that.
And I don't know what else to suggest other than.
How about now?
Oh, hang on a sec. I think I've got my laptop muted. Hang on.
Can you hear me now? Still talking. Hey, what's going on? Just wondering if you can hear me. Can you hear me at all? It says that my mic is working. So yeah, this is the mic working. I'm using my default Mac mic.
So we're doing a bit of a. Okay, so we can hear you on YouTube. We can't hear you here, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I think my mic is working. It's picking up and pinging stuff. Okay. Yeah, I think my mic is working. It's picking up and pinging stuff. There's like a 12-second delay on that. My mic is working. It's picking up and pinging stuff.
1 second, we'll try and figure this out.
Yeah, thanks for accommodating me not being there with you guys. I'd love to be there in person, obviously. But yeah, I had some other commitments later on tonight. But next time. Just turn the mic volume up a little bit. See if that helps.
Okay, Jay.
Hey, Scott.
Woo!
Is it working? Okay, awesome. Awesome. Okay, almost got away with it. I was gonna, disappear and never come back. But yeah, thanks so much for giving me a chance to speak. Sorry, my slides are accelerating ahead without me. So I'm Jay. I am a legal engineer and head of legal operations at a company called Stevenson Law. I also founded a startup in the middle of the pandemic called SenseCheck, which targets another area of law. But what I wanted to talk about today was building dashboards with Smartkit. So in terms of my development background, I've been coding and hacking around for probably about 6 or 7 years. And I sort of fell in love with Vue as a framework when that first came out. So the transition from Vue to Svelte was really nice. And we have a greenfield project at the law firm I work at. And we are tasked with visualizing more of our data. So given it was a greenfield project and that I built a few things in SvelteKit before, mostly brochure sites, I wanted to push my limits to do something a bit more dynamic, a bit more interactive. So this project really served as a good playground for me to sort of test out some of the features. And it's been fun trying to keep up with all the changes as we work through the beta to 1.0. and things like changing from load functions and playing around with new page endpoints. But what I found with SvelteKit was just the ease of use and the fact that it really fit my mental model that I built up over the last couple of years. So hopefully the slides are staying where they should be. I can sort of see it moving around the screen a little bit. But why did we choose SvelteKit for this project? Mostly because it was my decision. So I was, really pleased that I had a greenfield project to sink my teeth into with it. But the things I like about it personally, and the things that proved well, were the reactivity. And there's some really nice little bits of reactivity in what I'm going to show you in a second. But the developer experience as well is really, really clean and simple. I love it when I do my npm installs and there's like no vulnerabilities, a small number of packages. Having Vite under the hood makes everything really quick from a dev experience side. And I really like the fact that SvelteKit had routing baked in and stores baked in. Sorry, I should have put stores on this slide as well, because that's a big part of the joy of using SvelteKit. So I think having moved from Vue and using like Vuex and Vue Router, it was just so much easier to get going quickly. And as this was, essentially this is a little beta project, a little beta dashboard, to do something, in a week to, make it nice and functional, was really, really nice to use SvelteKit for that. So just a little bit about the architecture of this application. So we have a Laravel backend that's doing it's consuming a couple of third-party APIs, pulling it down, doing an ETL process, and giving me an endpoint to query in SvelteKit. So I'll try and show you a little bit about the data and what it looks like, but just keep that in mind in terms of where that data is actually coming from. It's just it's a custom Laravel app that we use to pull the data down and serve up an endpoint. So I just wanted to talk quickly about the layout file of what you're going to see. So, and I think for me, if you're new to Svelte or SvelteKit, if you're new to SvelteKit, then just understanding how the slots work and with the routing was really nice. So, most dashboards, we've got a sidebar with some things to select. We've got a nav where maybe the login parts will sit, and then there's this big spot in the middle in the page where the slot goes into. And that's essentially when you go through your different routes, then they appear in the slot and everything else stays the same as static. So that's kind of how it looks. And in terms of the actual code, this is simplified a little bit because I've got some authentication that runs over this, which dictates what gets displayed in different parts. But, I'm just importing the CSS into the layout file. And then my two main components, the sidebar and the nav, just dropped in there with my slot in between. Now, this was my first gotcha when I was doing it. Sometimes you can, self-close a tag, but here the slot needed to be in a open and closed tag in order for it to stop spilling over. So it was just one little thing that probably isn't super well documented, but it was key to making sort of this application nice and slick for me. And by the way, as I'm going through this, I really want to emphasize that I'm not an expert in any of this. I'd probably say that I'm still traversing the beginner to intermediate phase of my development career, really keen to push forward. So if there's any feedback on code or whatever, please reach out, because I'd love to get better. So, yeah. So all dashboards generally will have some sort of chart function. I chose to use chart.js. I'm not going to talk in detail about chart.js as a package or as a API. It's really well documented. There's tons of videos out there, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I got chart.js to work in SvelteKit, because there were one or two just things that either weren't. It's not that they weren't documented well, but obviously the chart.js library is just vanilla JavaScript. There are some packages that are, Svelte chart.js, but I chose to just use this standard chart.js npm install. And the first gotcha was not having the stroke auto on the end of my import for the charts that I wanted to import. So that was the first thing. So remember that, because it took me a while to debug that, I suppose, or it took me a while to search through Stack Overflow to find somebody else who maybe had that problem. But it worked nicely once I got that started. So that's just a little bit about the installation. And then there was another part in the config. It was just in the vconfig about making sure that I had this part here. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor over this, but it's where it says no external chart.js. That was also another gotcha, just to make sure that it worked nicely and smoothly. And then, you know, the logic that I had to go through is that, okay, I know Smartkit gives me the ability to load the data before the page renders. So I want to go and get my data and fetch that from the API. And in this project, we still have the old load function in there, and you know, as a context module in the script tag at the top. But I'll probably switch to a page endpoint because I think I can save up some code on the refresh. But I'll show you what I did anyway, and you know, you can think about how you might make it better in your own projects. Yeah, sorry, I had 2 slides in one place. So just sort of a mental model for me about what I'm doing as I'm bringing the data in. So I'm loading the data to a page component. So in that layout file, I've got underneath it in the roots, my different pages, and I want to load the data in that page. In the future, I might have a page endpoint that mirrors that. But the first thing I do is set some data to a store, and I'll talk a little bit about stores and what I did there. And then I want to receive my data as props and pass it to a child component. Now, honestly, despite having coded for a while and all of the front-end frameworks using props, I found it really confusing in terms of like pass down and pass back up and stuff. And Svelte just made it super easy. It was, you know, it feels like I'm just writing vanilla JavaScript to move data around, and it just works with my mental model. So super happy about that. And also I'm passing it sometimes to, you know, multiple child components for more complex pages. And yeah, so once the data is received as props to child component, I've then got to figure out how to render it in chart.js. Now, that was initially kind of easy in one sense, but you'll see some of the reactivity that I need to re-render the chart when I fetch new data without reloading the whole page. So I want to talk a little bit about how I overcame that. So I think that is all of the slides that I was able to prepare. And it's probably enough slides anyway. I think, you know, the magic comes in actually looking at what we did. So I think if I click share, unshare screen, so I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go for, let's go for the, if I choose a window, I think I can share that. Okay, so hopefully you can all see this page. Just going to make that one smaller. So hopefully you can see this window here. Oh, in fact, sorry, I'm going to stop and just share the entire screen because I think my viewport's going to change a little bit. Sorry, just bear with me 1 second. Stop sharing. Head back here. Go to StreamYard. Probably see my face. So as the first time using this, I'm going to share my entire screen. Okay, great. You can probably see yourselves again, but there we go. Okay, so this is the dashboard. Again, it's built with Tailwind, but, you know, very popular these days. And even though it's an internal tool, wanted to make it feel professional. We have really high standards as a law firm here that in terms of what we do. So, like, you know, just kind of designed that. And then I did actually use Auth0 to deal with the authentication. In hindsight, I probably wouldn't do that in the future. I found it like a little bit fiddly. I watched some videos by James Quick, who is awesome in the Svelte community, but I couldn't initially get the cookies to persist. And then I found some really great content by WebJetta on a slightly different topic, which allowed me to get it to work without sort of clearing on a refresh. And it was really nice. So if I just do my login here, so admin at test, just a dummy one. It should work nicely. And then you see that I've used some logic just to switch out this so I can go to the dashboard. So this is actually just some dummy data, but the fun really happens in this dashboard in this time records function, or sorry, time records page. So if you can just go back in your memory as to the layout that I talked about. So at the top, we've got a nav bar, which has a bit of information about being logged in and logged out. And then on the left, we've got a sidebar, which have the different page routes. So, you know, this main section here is the slot. where the content comes in and the child components. So if you think about from the top here, this is the top page component, and then everything else are smaller child components. And I'm sharing data between all of them. So we've got a donut bar on the left, which shows some utilization, and there's a bit of arithmetic that goes in on the data client side, which then gives me some percentages and a nice graph. I've then got a chart which shows activity over a range of days. And then I've got a table which kind of summarizes all the data. And there's actually an export function here, which you can export that data as a CSV. So I'm really happy with where I got to, because it ticked a lot of the requirements that I had internally in making it work. I think it looks good, but that's nothing to do with me. That's to do with Tailwind and Chart.js being awesome. But if I show you how the functionality works, so the first thing that has happened in the background is that a load function has been called, and the API has given me a big data set, which includes a list of advisors. Now, this data is coming from a real API, but it's fake data. So take it with a pinch of salt, or don't read too much into it. And I'm using stores here to populate this list. So this isn't hard-coded anywhere. It's not set. It's just coming back from the API and is being stored in an advisor array. And that's important because when I select one, I then want to have a selected advisor that updates all of the UI. So you can see that as I click through, it's just going to keep re-rendering all the data without changing the page. And this really is to do with Svelte stores and the awesome reactivity you get through it. It just knows which bits have changed and which data to update. So yeah, if I go through just one more time, then you can see it doing that. And I'll show you a little bit about how the logic works, or the bits I found to make this happen in that way. But just one other thing just to show in terms of nice UI is that the person you've selected is highlighted. I might do some other things with this table in terms of maybe dropping them to the top. I think that might be helpful. But we get all the advisors back at the same time, and then the individuals, and you can just see which one is highlighted and go from there. So this next bit I wanted to talk about was the date picker. So there was a really nice, I think I've got it in a tab here. It's this date picker. Sorry, Bionk didn't use your date picker, but this one works really well for the use case I had. So it was, I think it's called Date Picker Svelte, which I picked up from Scott Tolinsky in one of his videos. Super nice. You're able to give it, max and min values. So the way this works is that the initial store sets the date based on yesterday, because we can't query today's date because the API doesn't have it yet. And it goes back 7 days automatically. So the first chart you see is a 7-day range. So when you look at the date picker, you'll see that the dates going forward into the future aren't there because it's got a max limit that's being set by a store. And then the from dates, it actually only goes back as far as our financial year end. So you can't go back to a previous financial year. So it's just little things like that, which helps users not run into errors if they query dates that are the one that aren't available, or if they do things the wrong way around. There's a little toast function, which is really cool. So if I go into the future, or if I set this one into the past, you'll see that the dates can't be that way around. So it's just a nice little toast function. If I've got time, I'll show that as well, but I might run out of time. So if I just hit hard refresh on this, just so I can reset those dates, and when you click through here, the data changes there, but to widen the date range, so let's go back to 3 more days, you need to hit refresh, because that's a fresh call to the API. Because the way the API works, it requires date parameters to know what to turn back. But you'll see that even though I had to, extend and hit refresh, the reactivity just knows just update these parts and move forward. So I'd love to show a bit of code. It's probably a little bit messy, but if you can, forgive me in that it's a sort of beta project. So I think the first thing to show you would be that that component, that page component that comes in. So this is the page component, and here is the old style load function that comes in. So I'm getting setting a couple of variables that I'm passing then into the the query string. This is how the data is called from the API. Interestingly, there's obviously an API key for security that's stored in the env file. Because you're using Smartkit, it needs to be prefixed with Vite at the moment, and that was just something that was apparent from the start, but thought is worth mentioning. Obviously, with the load function, you can just set your headers. And I guess the interesting part is that the data is coming back, and I'm just doing some manipulation with it there and passing it down as props. So then in this page component here, I'm then setting some stored values. So one of the props was the array of advisors that's in that drop-down list. So I'm just setting that to the stored advisors array. That's useful because there are other pages in the application that need that array as well. So essentially, when it's loaded, from any one place, it will be there, and some of the other pages don't go and fetch data. And the start and end dates for the query are also just stored as well, which is useful for that date picker. So I'll come back to this section in a second, but let's take, say, the bar chart. It's just taking the data as a prop, and it's then, if I head into a bar chart one, it's then receiving it as a prop here. And this is probably the more interesting area about how we got chart.js to work. So I think you saw that code snippet before. So I've got my chart.js stroke auto, making sure that works nicely. And one of the things that I had to sort of figure out is like, okay, where in the life cycle do I need to render my chart? Obviously, I want to render it on mount. I know that Sveltekit is handling the data load first, so I'm safe to do that. And so on mount, it's calling the render chart function. So this looks really similar to the chart.js documentation, albeit with a couple of caveats. If you looked at chart.js documentation, you know that you just set the data sets. So these are getting set and pulled down from this function up here. But the things that got me were just about the initialization of it. So the context object for chart.js and what you're actually calling your chart. So mine's just called my bar. I think I probably didn't get very creative with that. I had to remember that you definitely need to initialize them. I went back and forth. It kind of worked sometimes without initializing them, and other times it didn't. But yeah, they 100% should be initialized at the start. So just to show you how that reactivity part works. So this, I always forget what to call this, but the $if part, I saw this in a tweet from Rich Harris, and I think somebody was, just saying it looked weird, and I think he said, it's valid JavaScript or whatever. But it works really nicely because essentially when I'm flicking between my advisors, and even on the first render, it allows me to call a function and set the data for it. So the first time the data is loaded, it's every advisor that's coming through, and that data object goes into here. It's giving me all advisors as one of the arguments, and then it's just kind of looping through and updating the chart.js data sets and calling my update on the chart.js bar. Sorry, on the chart.js sort of initialization or whatever. So this allows the first render to take the new data that's been fetched. Without doing this, I've found that it would just render like a blank chart, or render a chart with just dummy data if I had it in there, or variables that were set with data. So you have to also initialize all the variables I want to use in that chart function. But then working through it, this worked really nicely. Like, this may not be like really nice JavaScript, but it works. It's a pretty deep nested array. So I'm having to kind of go through and find things and pull them out and assign them to each of these variables as we go. But it works, really nice. And I'm really happy with how that smoothness between changing the variables works. There's no like full page refresh. So yeah, that was really great. If I look at a store a second, I think it's called Advisor Store, then I can just show you a little bit about what the store looks like. I found this to be the highlight for me when I got this working without much effort. It was just like, okay, great, I get it. I can, create my stores that I want to have, or my, the variables I want to store data to, give them the writable part, kind of define what they're going to be. Some of them, are objects as opposed to arrays, and then just use the dollar syntax in front wherever I want to reuse that stored data. So here there's just some work just setting dates for all the different date parameters I need, going back to financial years, past week dates, all that kind of stuff. Nothing too interesting there. And those are all the dates that are being exported there. So if I go back to the table part, so I might just flick the screen just to remind everybody what that looked like. So this is the table, and this is obviously like a subset of the larger data set that comes in. And there were just some nice things about, looping through the table and using the I think the each syntax that just thought was cool. So if I head over to, I think it'd probably be in the table row part. No, it'd be in the table part. So yeah, so table Svelte. Yeah, this is it. So a couple things that are happening here. So I am just setting out the advisors as they come through, and then doing my table row with the advisor name and all the relevant data that needs to be put in. One thing I really liked about it is you don't need to do like advisor equals advisor. You can just write advisor if the names match. And I've got a little bit of destructuring here in terms of looping through and getting the data out, which I thought was really nice. I really like this syntax. I think I saw a tweet today, somebody comparing how to do like loops in different frameworks, and I think somebody said this was too much magic. But I think having done a bit of Django and done a bit of Laravel, like it's kind of really similar in its mental model for me. So I like this kind of style in terms of how that's done. If I head back to a table row, you'll see that somewhere in here, no, it's not the same row, it's back in the table. There should be a bit where I'm highlighting the applying like a class dynamically on part of this. Where's it gone? No, I think I've forgotten where it is. I'll ignore that. Yeah, okay, well, let's head back over here. Yeah, so I suppose I could wrap it up just quickly talking about what I would do differently. I think that I would definitely use the new page endpoints. This function here, when I refresh and make another call with a new date parameter, I think that using page endpoints would kind of save me duplicating some of the logic in the code to get that data back. Oh yeah, that's a really cool thing that I did find out about event forwarding. So when you click on this, it's calling a function that's in a parent component to refresh it. So I'll show you that. So that bit is in, I think it's in a drop down. So that's the drop down component. And there's probably a button with a click event somewhere. Oops, sorry. Hopefully this is big enough, by the way. Apologies if not. Yeah, so I think this is the refresh button, and there's the click event, right? So in order to do event forwarding, where you can take a click event from a child component and pass it up to a parent component, you just give it the on-click description or the on-click. Sorry, words are failing me here. You just put that in there. And then your parent component, which here is my hours page, it's got this on click here. So it's saying, hey, every time on that child component you hear on click, then call this function, which is called refresh, and trying to name things similarly. So it's calling this function here, which is just giving me a new fetch of that data. And I think it's just using like standard fetch, good old browser API fetch, to get back and return the data. And it's just updating those props that were there and that have been stored. So that was another really nice thing, which I think I got a nice example from NetNinja for people who like to follow his stuff. And yeah, I think I'll wrap it up because I'll probably get a bit messy as I keep going deeper into a messy code base. So I'm going to try and find you again because I can't see anything or anyone, and hopefully everybody's still here. I'm going to stop sharing, and I have no idea if anybody can hear me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jay. So no one can hear me at the back. That's fine. I hope you can hear me at home. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, brilliant. So is there any questions anyone has for Jay about what he's been doing with his dashboards in SvelteKit? No one. Okay, so with regards to the page endpoints, okay. Yes. Okay. That's exactly what I was going to ask. So the question was, Jay, with regards to calling your API in the load function, if that is going to expose your API key on the front end.
No, I don't think it does. I think the
Okay.
way I'm
Because it goes
sure.
by.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's because it's I think because it's in the load function, it's a server side request anyway. So hopefully pass that test. But I've been exploring I guess like the params function and understanding what's being sent server side and what, you know, setting my headers properly and things like that. So yeah, I did, you know, I'm aware of those kind of security things, but I'm pretty sure it's all good on that one.
I had a lot of fun myself trying to work out what is being exposed on the client. So
Yeah.
the times. So I think I wanted to ask you as well with the load function is just bear with me a sec. Sorry. Just teensy bit. I'm not going to shout. Right. Okay. So I'm going to have to shout. Sorry, mate. If I'm coming across loud, but people need to hear me here as well. So with regards to the load function and shadow endpoints, there's a lot of like duplicated code, which I know you sort of explained. But in your situation, do you think you need to use shadow endpoints with what you were doing, or could you just keep it in the load function as it was?
I think it works pretty well just being in the load function. I suppose like I want to, you know, try out sort of new methods and see what best practices come out. But I think it was the fact that I had to make a second call and have that fetch function that does another part. I think I didn't actually show it, but there's an API endpoint which looks very much like the load function. So that when, you know, the part where I showed you what the refresh is calling, that's actually an API endpoint in Sveltekit that's almost exactly like the load function. So I'm hoping that by using a page endpoint, I won't have to have the load function and the separate API, and I can just bring them together and just call it again. So, but we'll see. Like I'll probably try that out maybe tomorrow on Monday and see what back.
Also, I think it's really I won't say funny, but the novelty of using fetch in your sort of code as well. Like it's a novel thing now that we actually use in browser APIs in front end code, and it's great just being able to use browser APIs, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, I've played around with Axios and stuff, and you know, I think for the things I've needed to do, fetch has worked just fine, and it makes sense and is well documented. So yeah, you know, I'm definitely not like a purist about anything. I'll just take what I can get to work. But yeah, it's nice when you can use the native APIs for sure. So yeah, super happy about that.
Cool. Okay, so I think we are ready for Mark Volkman to do his talk, but I think Anthony wants to do. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I wish I could see your faces, but yeah, you all look great.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got. I'll go away from the mic. We've got Mark Volkman. Mark has published a book with many publications recently. He's going to give us some of the excerpts from the recent talk he's done. It's not going to be long. What Mark is talk. There is food.
Use this now.
There is food. Oof. And if anyone wants, it's 2 for 1 burgers. So anyone who's here in a couple tonight, could you raise your hands? Anyone who's here in a couple tonight, could you raise your hands? Is there people? No one understands.
There's 2-for-1 burgers, right? So basically, find a partner and get a burger because then you get 2 and it's only cost you the price of 1. Right, good. Finish. Scott, you're really labouring the point here.
It's care of Graph CMS, right? So we have a tab.
Yes.
Yes, there's also a tab.
So you don't need to pay for your food.
What is the tab called?
The tab is called Graph CMS, I guess.
Okay. All right, and one more thing. Svelte Summit is this weekend, so don't forget to watch it if you get a chance. Anything more? Cool. On with Mark.
Mark's talk is at 10 minutes, right? So Mark's talk is 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, Mark's talk is 10 to 15 minutes, so we'll wait 10 to 15 minutes, then we'll get food and drinks, whatever else. Scott, it's okay, we've solved it. Scott, chill, man. Doesn't matter. Because the camera's here. Right, so streaming ourselves to ourselves. So, you have to mute something. Because that's streaming still.
So I do this as well.
Right, try again.
Can you mute your laptop?
Yes.
Check 1, check 2. Okay. Not too loud. Okay. Can I just say that this whole stream is going out on a mobile phone connection. So yeah, well done, Smarty UK.
Are we ready?
Sorry?
Yes, sorry about that, everyone. So we have Mark coming. Where you?
St. Louis. Yeah, I'll get it. Yeah, so I'm Mark Volkman. I'm from a long way away. I'm from the St. Louis area, way in the middle of the United States. And this is my first time in London. I'm here to speak at that conference. And so what I'm giving you tonight is some excerpts from the talk that I gave. But at the end, I have a link to the full slide deck if you want to go through the whole thing. I wrote that book. So yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about myself, but I've been doing this for a long time. And one thing I would tell you about the book is if you are interested in getting it, I really don't recommend getting it from Amazon because, you can get sales from Manning all the time, like 40% at least, and you'll pay like half of what Amazon wants from you. So one thing I really want to emphasize tonight when you're thinking about Svelte is how important it is that Svelte is a compiler. I don't think we talk about that enough and how that distinguishes it from other frameworks. And so what I want to go over in this slide is some of the things that you get by being a compiler. And the main thing I want to emphasize here is that other frameworks like React and Vue and Angular, they could look at features of React and say, well, why don't we just add those to our framework? But they can't because they're not a compiler. So let's talk about that a bit. So as you probably are aware, Svelte does not use a virtual DOM. And how does it get away with that? So virtual DOM is a really bad idea. And you can go to that link and read about why it's such a bad idea and why it's just so efficient. But Svelte can look at what you're actually doing in your components and determine, oh, here's a place where you're using that variable. So I guess if the value of that variable changes, we might need to replace that part of the DOM. And that's really a big magical part of Svelte. Another important thing is that Svelte has some custom syntax. You've seen the #if, the #each, some other things like that. You've got to be a compiler to do that, to find the bits of syntax that you've added in place. Svelte can detect unused CSS. This is a really nice feature because you've probably worked on projects in the past where your CSS over time just grows and grows. And then one day you're wondering, I don't think I need that. Do I need that? And what can you do? You could delete it and see if you broke something, but did you find everything that might have broke? So Svelte is really good about highlighting for you, this is a thing you're not even using anymore so that you can get rid of it. And then finally, Svelte is just really good at looking at the whole body of code for your application and figuring out, well, what is being used here? And transitions were mentioned earlier. A lot of transitions built into Svelte. You're probably not using them in all of your apps. And so the Svelte compiler can figure out, well, you're just using 2 of them. So let's just include the code for those 2 in what is being deployed. So the fact that Svelte is a compiler, I think, is a really big deal. And other frameworks can't do the things Svelte does because they're not compilers. The next several slides are a bit like intro Svelte material, and maybe some of you will appreciate this, and others of you, it'll just be a review. But, in Svelte, when it sees $:, well, that's real JavaScript syntax for a label whose name just happens to be $. But the Svelte compiler co-ops that and says, when I see that, I know you want to have a reactive statement. And so this means if anything I'm referencing in this statement changes, I need to run that statement again. This is very much like spreadsheets where you put a formula in a cell of a spreadsheet. And if any cell you're referencing changes, you recompute the value of that cell. Really nice feature. And so just some really quick examples. Suppose score was an array of numbers. If anything in that array changes, I want to add all the numbers up again. And so I could have a reduce statement like that. And I know that if the scores array changes, I'm going to recompute the value of total. And then really great for debugging, I could use a reactive statement for a console log so that if the value of total changes, I'll print it out again to the DevTools console. Evaluate cart, that call right there. I want to say if the cart changes, like I've added an item or I've changed a quantity of an item, or if the tax rate changes, then I need to call evaluate cart again. Presumably in this case, it has some kind of side effect, like maybe it changes some other variable that I'm rendering somewhere. And I can be confident that if my cart changes or the tax rate changes, it will call that again. And then finally, the most general thing you could do is put the $: in front of a block of code. And then if anything you reference in that block changes, it's going to rerun that block of code again. So a really good example of this, I think, is this loan calculator that I've put together. And so you see what it looks like over on the right. I can enter in a loan amount, an interest rate, a number of years that I want to take for paying off this loan. And then at the bottom, it's going to compute that for me. And so let me show you what that looks like inside a Svelte REPL. Oh, yeah, great. Okay. So I think this is just a really great example of using reactive statements. And I want to start by just going down to the bottom and let's take a peek at the HTML here. And you see, as I scroll through here, there's not much code here. So I've got some basic parts of my UI. I've got to have a label for that loan amount, and then I've got an input, and then we've got, of course, the bind : value, because I want to make it so if the user types into that input, I'll update that variable. Or if my code changes the variable, it'll update what's displayed in the input. I'm binding in both directions. Same thing for the interest rate, binding to the variable interest rate, and then the number of years binding. And then finally at the bottom, and I can't scroll down to unexpose that. Can that be moved to the right-hand side? But in any case, I'm just trying to display the value of payment and displaying it with 2 decimal places. And so if I scroll back up to the top, you see those variables that I was binding to. And so that's where they get their initial values. And then the one simple constant, there are 12 months in a year. And so if I come over to here and I start changing some things, like let's change my loan amount to be 300,000, then my monthly payment just jumped up a lot. And if I come over to the interest rate and bump that up, you see the monthly payments changing. And if I increase the years, it's going down now, very reactive. So the magic of this is all in the reactive statements. So if I change the number of years that I'm going to take for paying off this loan, well, then I need to recalculate the value of months. And if I change the interest rate, I need to calculate, well, what's the interest rate for each month? Then if I change the loan amount, well, there's this calculation where I'm going to have a numerator divided by a denominator. And the loan amount affects the numerator, and so does the monthly interest rate. And so I'll recompute that. And then there's the denominator part, and we don't need to get into the math that's behind this, but really the big deal is computing the payment. So if I don't have a loan amount because maybe I set it to 0 or I just deleted what was in there, I can't calculate anything. And so I'm just going to use the value 0. Or if I don't have a number of years, I'll set it to 0. But if I have both of those, oh, then I'm checking to see, did I enter an interest rate? Because if I did, then I just want numerator divided by denominator. But if I don't have an interest rate, I don't have to pay any interest. And so then my payment is just the loan amount divided by the months. So with this very simple setup, I've got a nice loan calculator. There's hardly any code here. And so if you think about what it would take to do this same thing in some other framework, it would be way more code than what you're looking at here. And I've had some people try to show me how they would do it in some other frameworks. Solid was one example of that. And one thing I think you'll find when you see another framework try to do this is that in general, if anything changes, they're going to redo all of those calculations and they're going to update all of the DOM for that. But let's think about what's happening here. What if I just change the loan amount? What has to happen? Well, I need to recalculate the numerator, but I didn't have to recalculate months and I didn't have to calculate monthly interest rate. Now, because I changed the numerator, I have to recompute the payment, but the denominator didn't change. And then on top of that, Svelte is smart enough to know that the only thing in the DOM I have to update is right here. Just the monthly payment. I don't have to update the rest of the DOM. So Svelte lets me do this sort of thing in a very small amount of code, and it's very efficient in what it's recomputing and what parts of the DOM it has to update. I want to show off one quick example of animations that are built into Svelte, but you can find all of these examples if you go to my blog site. And so I have a link coming up later, but it's just mvolkman.github.com. And then if you go there, that's my homepage, and there's a link to the blog up at the top. And then there's a whole bunch of topics that I cover in my blog, things way beyond Svelte. But if you go to the Svelte category, there's a REPL link and you'll find all of these. Okay, so one more time, mvolkman with 2 N's, .github.com. So the one of these that I want to show is a custom animation to show you, yeah, there's a bunch of built-in ones that you can just use, but custom ones aren't that hard to add. Okay, so here's the one we want to walk through. And you see where it says, take me for a spin, and I'm going to hit toggle, and it's like it's going down a drain. And then I click toggle again, and it comes back. And I can even say I want this to be springy, and now there's some spring to the animation. So surely you have to write a lot of code to get something like that, right? Well, if I scroll down to the bottom here and start looking at the HTML, you see I've got this if show. If I want to show it, then I want to show this div, and here's that text, take me for a spin. And then I want the transition to be spin, but that's not one of the built-in ones. So if I scroll back up to my JavaScript, I see, oh, here's a function called spin. And this just needs to be a function that takes the DOM node that you want to apply this transition to, and then some options. Well, there's a bunch of options that Svelte will support for you, and those include the duration, like what is the time span over which this is supposed to occur. And then the easing function you want to use, there'll be a default provided for you. And then in my case, I have one custom option. It's how many times around do I want the thing to spin? And so I want it to go around twice. So when I come into this custom function where I'm implementing my own transition, I just need to return an object that has all of those options so that Svelte can handle the default ones. But then what I want to do is I want to give it a bit of CSS, and it's going to take it from there. And in my case, I want to do a transform, and I want to adjust the scale of this thing that I'm displaying so that I can shrink it down to nothing. And I want to affect the rotation. So the most important thing here is that this object I'm returning not only has options, but it has this method CSS. And that's going to be passed a number between 0 and 1. Okay, so my transition is going through a bunch of values from 0 to 1. And the easing function is controlling how quickly it goes from 0 to 1. And then, of course, the duration is how long is it going to take to go across that. And now my only job is to say, well, what should the scale be for a particular value of t? And what should the rotation be for a particular value of t? And that's what you see on this line right here. I'm setting the scale and the rotation. Notice that the rotation is taking that number that's between 0 and 1 and multiplying it by the degrees through which I want to rotate this thing. Okay? And that's all I need. And I now have this spin rotation, spin animation that I could apply to anything. And one other thing that I think is really nice to review when you're thinking about how you communicate between components in Svelte, I think it's useful to remember that there really are only 6 options, and 3 of them are very common and 3 maybe not so much. And so I would say that using props to pass data from a parent component to a child is maybe the most common thing that you're going to do. A second really common thing is when you want data to go from a child up to a parent, because maybe the user did some interesting interaction with that child, and now the parent needs to know. And so you want to dispatch an event that goes upwards. And then I would say the third most common thing you would do is to use a store like you saw in some examples earlier, so that we have a really nice way that I can share data between all of the components in my app if I want to. And so there's only 3 others, and they aren't used as often. Let's see, slots are pretty handy. We saw one example of that tonight. This is where the parent does want to pass something to a child, but it's not just a piece of data. It's actually a chunk of HTML, or maybe even including some custom components. So that's slots. Let's see, context. in my experience, context has not turned out to be very useful. It's a big thing in React, but that's because it works totally different. In Svelte, the thing to remember is that this is a way that you can have some data at some point in your component hierarchy that things below it can see, but you have to remember that this can't be dynamic data. And what I mean by that is that once the children are rendered, if the data in that ancestor changes, the children aren't going to find out about that. It's not dynamic the way that stores are. And I think that's the biggest reason why it turns out it's not really used that often. And then the last one, module context. And the way I like to think about this is that by default, all the things that you're doing in a component are kind of instance level. Like when you declare variables inside your script tag, they're only for use by that one instance of the component. If you have another instance, they'll have different values for those variables. But the script with the context of module is a way that you can share data between all instances of the same component. So sometimes this is used maybe because you want to know, well, how many of that component have I created so far? And you could have a counter that's in the script with a context of module where you keep track of those sorts of things. Another thing that's useful is if you want to create a function that you want to export so that other code can get to it, then doing that in the module context is also useful. And I'm wrapping up here. I've given a lot of talks on Svelte, and most recently, the conference that I spoke at a couple of days ago. And something that's becoming very apparent to me is the list of reasons that people give for why they don't want to use Svelte. And I think that I was very naive about this early on, even until recently. And I always had this thought, if I could just get people to listen to me talk about it and let me show them some code, maybe even some side-by-side examples of how to do things in their framework versus Svelte, they'd see the light. They would see, oh, this is so easy. I would love to switch to Svelte. Unfortunately, I'm finding out this just is not true. Many people will believe you and want to switch. They'll be convinced, but many people will not. And so you might be wondering, why won't they switch? Well, I bet if you think about this a little bit, you could probably brainstorm reasons why people give for not wanting to switch. And I want to show you some of those now. This is a very common list. People are often offended by the use of the JavaScript keyword export to mean that you're passing in a prop. Now, of course, we know that because you're working in a .svelte file, it's not a .js file. This is not JavaScript. And so the Svelte compiler can do whatever it wants, and it's choosing to use that keyword to mean you're passing in a prop. But this bothers many people, okay? Another thing, a lot of people don't like the mustache-like syntax that we use in our HTML for $if and $each. I've grown accustomed to it. I suppose maybe it bothered me a tiny bit when I first saw it, just because I wasn't used to it. But there are lots of people that come from older frameworks that already had a syntax like this, and they think this is great. This is like what they were used to. But there are a large number of people that are offended by that syntax. I'm wondering how you all deal with trying to make a variable in a component that is an array to make that reactive. Like, let's say you want to add an element to an array and your UI needs to update and show the new values in the array. Well, there's a bunch of ways that you can do it. You could use concat and create a brand new array and assign it back to the variable. You could use the spread operator, again, creating a new variable and sign it back in. But I have to say that I never do it that way because maybe I'm overly concerned about efficiency. And so what do? I use the array push method and I push a new value onto the array. But of course, Svelte doesn't recognize that. It doesn't know that the array has changed. And so you have to do something to let the Svelte compiler know. And so, what's that? Oh. Wake up again? Oh, no. Yeah. Is that your last slide? It is the last slide. Well, let's see if I can talk through this. You've probably done this thing before where you say something like array.push value, and then what do? You say array equals array. And then people that are new to Svelte are like, what is that? That can't be doing anything, right? Well, yeah, that's telling the Svelte compiler that the array changed. So people are bothered by that. I wish that there was something that could be done in Svelte so that it could recognize array.push that it changed the array. And maybe Anthony will tell us later that that's on the roadmap for Svelte. I hope so. And then the last thing, and this might be shocking to you, the things that you love most about Svelte, well, those are also things that bother people. People will tell you, I don't like magic. And everything I see that's happening there, I call it magic. And then you say, yeah, but if I don't have that, look at how much code I have to write. I don't want to write that code. To which they'll say, I actually do want to write that code because it feels more explicit to me. So that's what we're battling against, I suppose. Now, we don't have to convince the whole world to use Svelte. It's okay. We can be happy using Svelte. But I'm just trying to share with you this list of things that people will bring up for why they don't want to use Svelte. Of course, the classic example of that is that you just have to set the value of a variable, and that counts as state, and things just update. And there actually are people that don't like that part of Svelte. Yes, it's the best. We all think that's the best part. And even reactive statements, like what I showed in that loan calculator. Some people are offended by that those reactive statements are just automatically firing to update themselves. So I'm kind of closing on a bummer here, but be courageous and go forth and write your Svelte and write short code, unlike the rest of those people.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions for Mark before we go and order our food? Okay, there's a question at the back. Can you join us? Oh, sorry. Can you?
I don't know very much about Svelte, so it's been lovely to drop in and learn a bit. But the compiler aspect is the bit I'm most interested about. So the reactive parts look in some ways similar to, if you cast your mind back to what only feels like last week, Angular 1, and you had two-way bindings. The problems that emerged from that was very poor performance because it was based on like these sort of continuous events that fired in the browser, right? So if you had like a lot of two-way bindings, you end up having something that's reactive but very poor performing. How does the compiler mitigate these performance concerns and still maintain like a reactive application style?
So in some ways, I think that Svelte handles this better because of conventions that we've gotten used to. So for example, I think in Svelte, we generally try to keep our components fairly small, and it's unlikely that you're going to write a component and feel happy about it when you have, say, over 20 reactive variables inside the same component. And so it kind of works itself out that way a bit. But another thing that could happen is that you might have a variable A that depends on B, and B depends on C, and C depends on A. And then the question is, what's the Svelte compiler going to do? And the answer is, it's very smart about that. You will get an error that you have a cyclic dependency between those things. And so in my experience, I just don't run into problems with those things. And I've never really seen a problem with efficiency there. But it may be because, as I said, I don't think Svelte developers tend to write components that have a large number of those kinds of dependencies on themselves, or even a large number of state variables within the same component.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? Or are we all hungry now? I am. Okay. So I guess there are no more questions. So again, thank you to Graph CMS for sponsoring our food tonight. And as Anthony has mentioned earlier, Svelte Summit is happening this Saturday. So tune in for that. And of course, belated happy birthday to Anthony, and happy birthday to Bikani. Anthony, you want to say a few words?
Happy birthday. No, not really. Actually, I'm older. This is great. Yeah, thanks for coming. Great turnout tonight. Actually, really happy. We've had some professional photographer. It is out of nowhere. Look at that. No, that's how it works. I have a Svelte compiler and I'm suddenly a coder. I mean, it's amazing. Check this.
Marcel Cuts, by the way, if everyone, it's Marcel Cuts. If no one knows who he is, he's Ret Advanced MC and MC'd at a couple of other events as well. So
Rock and roll.
putting the spotlight on it.
I can turn the camera. Hang on. Look there. Check that out. There's everyone else. Hello. Hello, YouTube.
Sorry, I hope you're okay with being online.
Yeah, you're online now. Never mind. Preserve forever. All right. Thank you. That concludes today.
Thanks, everyone.